right, welcome to another episode of Vinny Presents. I am your host, Vinny, and today we have a very special guest. In studio, we have Christina DiArcangelo. Christina, thank you for joining us. I'm going to let you present yourself because I think you're going to do it way better than I can. Welcome.
Thank you so much for having me on. I was so excited to be on your show today because we have a lot of things in common. We met initially over Instagram and we're connected to some of the same people, which is super cool. That's one of the things I love about social media. If without it, how would I know you unless I ran into you on the street somewhere in South Philly? Maybe. So thank you so much for having me on. Yes, my name is Christina DiArcangelo. I To those of you that do not know me, I'm originally a biotech pharmaceutical device nutraceutical executive. I've been in the space going on 26 years this May, so I started very young in my career. But don't hold it against me for those of you that do not like big pharma, because I kind of went rogue in 2016 and got into cannabinoid clinical research and full-blown nutraceuticals. And that's basically where I've been for, the past few years now, is in that space. Primarily because I feel like we can really help people with natural products as long as we do the proper testing. It's not anecdotal evidence where people are like, oh, I took this and my head felt better. Well, that's one person, that's not a study. So that, that's where I've spent most of my time. In 2015, I started my nonprofit, which is a patient advocacy firm. It's called Affinity Patient Advocacy. And we started that company in memory of my father. He had died at age 62 from stage 4 liver, lung, and stomach cancers. And that was when I realized that we don't know the things we really think we know in the pharma industry, because we design protocols and such, but we don't get to talk to the patients because of HIPAA. And so being in this position of trying to help my dad and seeing how there's a disconnect between the doctors and everybody, I thought, okay, I need to do something here. And so that's when we started Affinity Patient Advocacy. And we do that for no charge to any of the patients, because you're already paying enough, your co-pays, your out-of-pocket expenses, and all those things. So that we do for free. Recently, we added on a service offering for the biotech industry for patient recruitment services. So trying to help the right patients get into clinical trials, making sure we're ethically getting the right type of patients in based on the diversity criteria. So not just having Caucasians in the studies, actually soliciting African Americans, Asian American, indigenous people, people of color. A lot of people in the pharma industry, we know that we're supposed to be doing it. FDA gave us the guidance in 20, but it's easier just to go with the flow like it's been. And it's not doing a justice to the patients, because we don't know how it will work genetically, potentially, in those patient populations. In 2020, I launched my brand. I am Christina DiArcangelo, and it's an empowerment brand. And under there, we have a podcast. We just launched season 2 of our podcast, which is a humanitarian focus. And we have an e-magazine that sits under the platform. It's a lifestyle magazine. It comes out every month. We talk about all kinds of things, whether it's cultural things or science or advocacy or fashion, whatever it is that I kind of feel like I want to talk about, we stick in the magazine. The reason why I decided to do that was because in the cannabinoid industry, we get blacked out, not as badly as we used to, but what I mean by blackout is it's like they turn the lights off on us, because if you use certain hashtags, which most people do for SEO purposes, we get lumped in with the recreational people when we're medicinal. So I was finding I was losing followers. People weren't seeing my posts. So I figured that out. I fixed my SEO and now I'm okay. But with my magazine, you can't black that out because it sits on my website. It'll be a little bit hard, And then also shortly thereafter, I started my artificial intelligence tech company with my partner. And there we have the way to capture data for clinical studies, which makes sense because I do clinical research and I own a clinical research organization who runs studies. So we needed the tech component. So we have a separate company that does that. We have bots in the middle. So we have the doctor bot, the Canna bot, the M bot. They will show up on your wearables. They can sit on websites. They're designed for clinical trials, but also for patient education, depending upon how the deal is structured with the client. And then we also have the telemonitoring side. And what's important about that is we're not trying to get rid of doctors. We're trying to shine almost a ring light down on the relationship, if you will, with the doctors and the patients, and having one place where the patients can go and have all their doctors connected to them so that people are actually talking to each other. So we figured a lot of this out because of our advocacy work. So you can see all these companies kind of work towards helping people, even my brand. And then lastly, last year, I launched my merchandise company called Sparkle Sisters. And that is where I have some of my merch that I've developed. It's things that I like my lashes that you always see me wearing. Those are my lashes. And today I have a pair on. And, I love hoodies. I love black. I mean, heck, we always look like we're going to a funeral. But I have some clothes that sit under there. I have an inspirational journal that I released with quotes that I've written over the years, and then space for the people to write underneath it, whether something about that quote that applied to them or something to help them get through the day. And lastly, what's really important about that company is we've developed a membership. So it's an online membership for women to, no offense, women to come together and be able to create a sisterhood so that people can actually like being around each other and share things and help one another and empower each other, because that's my goal at the end of the day. So that's a little bit about me. Sorry, that was a lot.
So like I said to the viewers out there, I told you she could do a better job of introducing herself than I could.
No.
But all joking aside, Christina, that's amazing. I mean, not only are you just said it yourself. I mean, not only are you bringing a new light on the medicinal world and how you're bringing things into a more modern age and things aren't being done the same old way. You're taking an unorthodox sort of a way of doing things and enhancing the ability for people to really know what's going on. And I love what you're doing with AI. I mean, that sounds amazing. And the fact that you're an entrepreneur and you're wearing a lot of different hats and you're able to do it and do it successfully, that's beautiful.
Thank you so much. And my background. So my dad. I grew up blue collar. My dad originally was a steel worker for Phoenix Steel in Phoenixville, PA, when we had an actual steel company that was there in apartments in part of the land that they used to have the steel mill. And then where they had the open heart, now it's this beautiful foundry where you can have weddings and all these kinds of things. So at least, they repurposed that building and they didn't knock it down. And after he was a steel worker, he became the president of the Steelworkers Union. So he was a union guy. He then, once they closed the doors of the steel mill, finally, after I don't know how many bankruptcies, 3, I think, he then became a Pennsylvania Turnpike worker and became a Teamster. And he was one of the lead negotiators on the Turnpike on behalf of the people that were all Teamsters. So that's how I grew up. So, it kind of made sense for me when I first got into the biotech space. I was a contracts negotiator because my dad was negotiating labor contracts, right, on behalf of all the laborers and filing grievances and things. So that's kind of how I learned how to work. So I'm a white collar person, but I'm a blue collar by heart.
I love it. Same here, same working class family from PA, obviously. Mm-hmm. And yes, there's a lot of places, unfortunately, that are no longer here that, at one time, Philadelphia, of course, but certainly PA was an industrial powerhouse for so many decades and fed so many families. And the struggle of being, starting from nothing, but the opportunity to grow. I mean, your dad, God rest his soul, is a beautiful example of that. And that is where I could tell you learned your ability to advocate and mediate, perhaps. So it's really cool to hear that background.
Thank you so much. I like to share that about myself because I don't want people to see like the glitz and the glam. I don't show up like this all the time. I'm a regular person, but I came from such a different background. And I think that's what's made me successful in my career, because I have grit, and some of the terminology I use is not necessarily white collar. So a lot of times people, because I'm kind of like going back and forth, people don't always understand like certain little things I'll say, but a blue collar person understands it because that's where they sit. And so it's kind of been an interesting endeavor, I guess it would be the best way for me to put it, trying to combine both of these know-hows and still be successful.
Yeah, absolutely. I would venture to say that most, if not all, but probably not all, most CEOs, most entrepreneurs, obviously, um, they're special people that have just something in them that is very, very unusual in a good way, and they usually start blue collar. So because it's really hard to be handed something and to make it even better. You'll see that with a lot of generational businesses, unfortunately. But if you start from the ground up, there's something special about that, and you have a lot of definitely that blue collar touch is really what gives you. I think it gives you a huge advantage in the marketplace.
I think so too. Like a lot of times I get questioned about like, the success question everybody always asks. Well, why do you feel you're successful? How did you become who you are? And I just did an interview this week actually, and that was one of the questions. It will be out in like 6 or 8 weeks. And what I talked about was my upbringing and how I saw how hard my dad worked, not only doing his job, but then representing the people, the laborers. And so from an advocacy standpoint, from what he taught me, but now I'm on the patient side, right, of the advocacy side of how, we work with people. I've even had to get involved in some of these patient issues where a person lost their job because they took a CBD product, which had a little bit of THC in the legal limits of the product. So the hemp law stipulates that federally 0.03% or lower is what you're allowed to have from a THC standpoint. So most CBD products, if you get like a full spectrum, it'll have some THC in it. This man took a legal, it wasn't like he found something off the street and took it, right? This was CBD that he bought in the borough that he worked in, and he was a union guy, okay? And he worked in the streets, the streets and service side of the borough. So very similar to my dad being a turnpike guy, right? He worked on the turnpike, the street, the maintenance department. So he lost his job because he had a test, a urine test, but he was within the legal limits, which you can tell with the test. It tells you the percentile. So, but the borough didn't understand and fired him because he popped positive for THC. He was a father, a single father with an autistic child. So right there, I was like, oh, what, this is unacceptable. He is supporting his child. His child has special needs. He has a lot of money he has to pay out of pocket for this. And now he lost his job and he's embarrassed, and he's had this job for 16 years. And he bought the product in the borough that he works in. So he called me, explained what happened, and I got in there and I said, I'm going to meet with your union because you should have your union representing you, obviously. You have to file a grievance. And I'm going to go in and explain the federal guidelines as it relates to hemp. I do clinical research for a living, right? So I read labs all the time. So I understand the labs. I understand the scores. I can eloquently explain it back. And I was in that meeting for about 3 hours. And I did kind of have to threaten them at one point, like, hey, listen, you have a borough meeting coming up. And if I show up, I can get the press to come and I will go on mic and tell them that you fired someone and you violated their federal rights under the hemp law. Is that what you want? Because I can do it. It's really simple. And you're not going to be able to get a gag on me before I come to your borough meeting because it's tomorrow. So they ended up finally agreeing to give him his job back, pay him back for all the time that he lost. And then I negotiated, not the team, not the union. It was not the Teamsters. It was some other small union, that he gets time back in his pension for the time he wasn't working, because I understand those things. Most white collar people don't understand pensions, right? Unless they work for a big corporation that has pensions. They don't get it, right? But because of the way my dad raised me, I knew enough to ask for it because they weren't going to give it to him.
That's, you know what, I'm sure they hopefully you got a seniority back, which I'm sure you made sure of, but
Yep.
that, because you know what happens with that. But no, that's it. Listen, I it's amazing. Sometimes you would think like the union would have a stronger position, but sometimes when they're smaller, a little bit weaker, they don't have the right tools. Like obviously you're an expert in the field, so but they may want to probably bring you on as a consultant someday.
Maybe.
That's a great story though.
Thank you. And you know what's cool though about it is there are unions that are larger that are representing the cannabis industry. And so, for example, the Teamsters, I don't know if you know this, but the Teamsters have a cannabis division. I met, yes, and I met the woman who was in charge. She was under the boss, right? But she was in charge of the West Coast cannabis division. And I love her dearly. We're still very good friends. She left that union and went to go work for another union that represents cannabis workers because that's a big, like, you know how you see when Starbucks is being mean to their employees and making them do all these things. Meanwhile, a cup of coffee is like $8, $9 and they're making nothing, that kind of thing that was going on. Well, that happens in the cannabis space if you're not union, right? They get taken advantage of. They have to work all these hours. They don't necessarily get OT. They don't get holidays. There's sometimes they don't give them health care. Some of these people out on the West Coast, the employers would try to pay them in cannabis. How am I going to pay my Pico bill? There's not Pico out there, but there are electric company out there with a brick of cannabis. Like, it can't be done. So thankfully, some of the bigger unions are in the space and they're representing the workers because they need representation because they're being taken advantage of.
That's, I never knew that. It's really interesting. I'm a big fan of Teamsters. I have a lot of friends that are, I'm a former union guy myself, so I have a lot of respect because look, at the end of the day, yet you need someone there to protect you. Most of us are just trying to work and pay our bills. We're not, most of us are not up on the laws. We're not up on, all the little nuances of workplace, regulations and protections. So it's a beautiful thing. I'm always pro union. Now let's switch gears for a second. Tell us a little bit about some of your challenges. What kind of challenges do you face right now in your industry? I know you have a bunch of different industries, but particularly the one that you're most into.
Well, one of the things that I'm finding is kind of like where I tipped my hat this in the beginning with trying to enroll studies with all the diverse patient populations. It's been a challenge because we try to do things the right way. We try to enroll patients in a safe manner, and we try to make sure that we enroll the right types of patients with that disease state. Not everybody does that. Not everybody wants to follow all the regulations, even though they're written for us to follow. They're the law. We need to do it. Not everybody's doing it. So we're doing it, but we're small compared to everybody else, right? So I've noticed some blowbacks here and there from some of my peers because I've been in the space so long where they're just like thinking I'm some blowhard, whatever. I'm just trying to promote my patient recruitment through my nonprofit. And it's like, no, it's not that. I'm not trying to make you spend money that you're not necessarily supposed to spend. You're supposed to do this and you have to figure out a way to do it. And we figured out a solution. At most of everything that I've done was intentionally based. But a lot of the issues that we have is, making sure we follow all the guidelines and people listen to us, but also, no offense, but being in a man's world my whole career, that kind of can get a little bit hairy, even now, I'm not that old in the space. I've been in a long time, but I started so young. So I still have people to my senior. And so sometimes I've seen things where, either it's because I'm a woman and I have authority, or it's my age, or sometimes I get discriminated against because I am blue collar by race and I'm not one of them. I'm not, I work in that space, but I didn't grow up that way. And when I see something wrong, you could tell I obviously will say something to help people if I see there's a problem. So those have been some of the things. And then just like the cannabis space in general, I mean, that's like, it's still the wild, wild west. People are still doing crazy things, advertising things, saying that stuff works. They didn't do any studies. Then they wonder why they got in trouble because they said they made a claim that it worked and they didn't do anything to test it.
Yeah, it sounds like it's attracting all kinds of, snake oil salesmen to try to promote things that are misrepresented.
Yeah, I always tell people if you can buy CBD at the gas station or a flea market, it's probably not the CBD you should be buying.
Yeah, maybe you should think about that. So what's coming up in the future? What are some of your goals, your plans?
Well, we have a lot of big projects that are going to start to roll off with all the companies, and it's stuff that we've been working on foundationally for the past 2 years. And these projects are meant to change healthcare to the positive so that we're able to help impoverished people. We're able to help people all over the world, not just primarily in the United States. I'm talking about helping people in Ghana, for example, helping the indigenous people in Canada that have, I'm sure everybody has seen on the news when Trudeau said, well, we're going to give $4.8 million to the indigenous people because we're still killing and raping them. This was last year. This is bad. So, we want to help those kinds of people because they need a voice, right? And we have the ability to help from a healthcare, biotech standpoint with potential studies, but advocacy. And then we have the tech because our wearables, all the wearables people wear, poured into our technology. So we know if you've been sleeping, we know if you're eating, we can tell your heart rate, O2, everything like oxygen. The doctors will be able to see that. So that's pretty exciting. We're really excited about that. And, my brand is we just hit 1 million followers this week. So
Congratulations.
thank you. That was big. And so I've been so blessed with it. The press I've been getting from my work, that I've been doing, the acknowledgement of all the things that I've done from a service standpoint, which means for free. It's finally starting to be recognized. And I didn't do it for recognition. It was because I want to help people. So I'm also working on a book. I'm almost done the book, which is amazing. It only took me 3 months to work on it with my editor, amongst everything else I'm doing. But I was very focused on this because it's about my mom's crime. When she was locked in the basement of my parents' home in East Pikeland Township in Phoenixville. And I rescued her from the basement March 24th of 22. Sorry, I always have to, because I do numbers 03, 24, 22. So I had to slow myself down because I'm also autistic. I'm spectrum, so I can see things in my brain. I know it's weird, but so I'm writing this book, and it's a memoir about the crime and what happened and the process of working with the authorities and the DA and everybody else. But it's also a self-help book so that elder abuse is coming up so much, and I didn't know as much as I know now because I was kind of blind to it because I was working on the patient side of things and I was estranged from my mom. I stopped speaking with her in 18 because she had massive mental health issues and was very abusive to me. And for my own sanity, I was like, I can't do this anymore. So I didn't know the stuff was going on. And I started figuring things out when my brother died. So we're going to go to trial February. That's what it says on the docket in Chester County. And it's going to be a little uncomfortable, right? Because now I'm the only one alive. My mom died January 13th of last year. She died before the charges were filed. So she died without any hope in her heart. And she was only 62. And it was very frustrating because I got her out of the basement. We had nothing. They had taken everything from my family. We had no more furniture, nothing. So
Wow.
she didn't even have clothes or shoes, proper shoes. So I had to buy stuff for her. I had to put her somewhere, couldn't put her back in the house because obviously we were concerned that they would get in there and maybe kill her this time. They knew she took those 14 bottles of pills that night, by the way. She tried to kill herself. So if in fact my sister-in-law wasn't on the phone that night, she would have been dead. And then what would have happened?
Wow, that is so sad. I'm so sorry you had to go through that. I'm sorry your mother had to go through that. My prayers and I'm sure the fans and the viewers are with you, and hopefully you get a great resolution from this and some closure. It's just horrible to hear. You hear too many of these stories, unfortunately. I mean, this is obviously very dramatic and very, unreal. I mean, but
Right.
these things happen. There's some just evil people out there, and I just can't stomach that kind of stuff. I really can't.
No, and like one of the things that I could say today to people is like check on your neighbors. If you haven't seen the person come out of their house and they normally come out of the house, maybe check on them. Go over there and knock on the door and just check to make sure they're okay. Because that's what happened. My mom stopped coming out of the house. And so if in fact the neighbors would have gone over sooner, then somebody would have known that she had been being held against her will in the basement. So that's one of the things I'd like to bring up is that we need to be more vigilant on what's going on.
Yeah, I'm a big believer in making sure that we protect our elderly, the children and the elderly, two most, the biggest victims that because of their vulnerability. So
Yeah, they're special population. You know what I
yeah,
mean? So we've got to look after these people and make sure that we're paying attention. I mean, a lot of the things that we see with child abuse cases, domestic violence, that's
right.
another big thing, and with the nonprofit, we help domestic violence people when they come to us. Because we have the capacity to do so. So like, okay, you need to call this person. Because, in the new year, I had somebody come in who was in Atlanta, originally from here, moved to Atlanta to live with her boyfriend. He beat her up. The kid's mom was home, let it go on. And our client had to come back to Philadelphia all busted up and everything. And I'm like, well, you've got to go through the Atlanta domestic violence division because it happened there. It did not happen in Chester County or Delaware County or wherever you live. It happened there. So you have to go to them. They have support to help you with the therapy and all those things, because when stuff like that happens, you cannot not talk about it, and you can't feel like it's your fault. No one deserves to be abused. You didn't do anything to be abused. You are a victim.
Yeah, well said. I mean, we there's just it never ends, But the good news is that at least there are all these type of advocacy groups, there's support systems like what you're doing. So, amen to that, and thank you for all that you're doing. That's a very special thing. Christina, listen, it's been a pleasure. I would love for you to tell people now where they can find you.
Okay, I always say it's the best place because I have all these websites and everything. The best place is just to go on www.christinadiarcangelo.com. That's easy. That's where my main brand website is, and it shows all my companies and everything, the press, my magazine, Instagram. I am Christina DiArcangelo. I do respond to the messages I receive regularly, and then from a professional standpoint, if you're a professional and there's something that you might think we could work on together, go on my LinkedIn. It's just Christina DiArcangelo, and you'll find me there.
Beautiful. Christina, it's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you for taking the time out to speak with me and our guests. I look forward to supporting you even further in the future, and I hope that all your dreams and your goals come true. And I have a hunch that they will, because you're a very determined person and very, very I would say very much a positive force and a guiding light for a lot of people out there. So keep up that great work.
Thank you so much. And thank you so much for being on. I was so excited to be on. I was like, oh, we're getting closer to Friday. I'm so excited to be on here today with you. And I look forward to having you on my show soon too.
Can't wait. Looking forward to it. Again, folks, if you haven't already, please make sure you're following all of her websites. We're going to make sure that they're in the description box of this program. So just click on them, support her, follow her on Instagram and her social media. If you haven't already, please subscribe to my channel here. And for the meantime, just have a great rest of your day, Christina. Thanks again, and we'll see you next time.
See you soon.